I'm really excited to get this game out for you. This is Merrill's Marauders, Commandos in Burma, 1943 to 1944. It is part of the mini game series from Decision Games, and it is, as you can see quite clearly here, a solitaire play game. When I learned of it recently, I was excited because the Commando series is a series that I have been wanting to play, and this particular game here, will look at the back of the sheet. It comes in a poly bag, is designed by Joseph Miranda, who with Decision Games published Struggle for the Galactic Empire, which is one of my all-time favorite games. We have the detail here of what comes in the bag. We've got the map, the counters, the mission cards, event cards, and the rules. And I'll just show you quickly, this isn't really an unbagging, but the counter sheet here is pretty clear, pretty basic. I will say it is quite thick, very nicely, nice thickness to it. Double-sided for most of the counters, have other information on the back. I have not yet even looked at the rules in detail, so I can't begin to tell you how this plays, but here's the sheet. I just wanted to show you the components. And of course we have a paper map, which I'll try to open up here. It is pretty standard stock thickness. For a Ziploc polybag game, I would say the components here, the map thickness, the counter thickness certainly are quite high quality, what I would expect from a boxed game. The rules, though short, are printed on glossy paper, black and white, but a sort of shiny, smooth stock. And the specific rules here with the indication of the counter types, very clear printing, and looks like pretty easy to read and pretty easy to get into. I haven't opened the cards yet. They are, for lack of a better word, a really cute size. I'll put the dimensions up. So we have the cards here. So we're going to get going once I get into learning about this game with Merrill's Marauders from Decision Games, a solo play. Just a further word about the components here. I don't usually get into such detail in my reviews, but I'm really impressed by the quality of these components for a relatively inexpensive bag game. And just to show you what I'm talking about here, these are the counters from the Decision Games Merrill's Marauders bagged game that we're talking about here. On the left are 10 counters stacked from Struggle for the Galactic Empire, which is also Decision Games boxed game. So 10 counters here from a box game from Decision, 10 counters from the bag game, and I've also got 10 counters from a GMT game here. You can see really while the Marauders counters are maybe slightly thinner than those that come in the box game, it's really a very, very mild difference, and they're basically exactly the same thickness as the GMT counters that I'm using as an example. All of these counters, I think, are quite sturdy and well done. The other points in terms of the components here, it's difficult for me to really demonstrate this, but the paper map for Struggle is, I would say, pretty much exactly the same thickness, and this honestly actually feels a little thicker than the map from Struggle. It's just a very, very nicely printed, thick paper map. And then finally the cards. Here's an example of a mission card. The color on these cards is quite bright, clear photos, clear writing, and really just very, very nicely done. They're pretty thick too. I mean, I certainly would say that I've had thicker cards, but whoops. They're definitely acceptable. I'm not going to sleeve them because they're so little and I'd have to go in search of the right sleeve, but they don't need sleeving. I mean, they are very nice quality components here in this game. All right, so here we are set up to play a game, and I'm going to take you through the counters, the elements of the setup, and get going, I just want to show you this overview. It's a pretty small footprint for the game, which you would expect with a micro game. It takes just a few minutes to set up, and you do not position, I guess there's the full map. In this particular case, I'm positioning a total of 4 unknown counters on the map, and these are determined by the particular mission here. Take a look at this mission card and the information that you see. So we have drawn Operation Longcloth, and we are told that our situation is to place 2 real objectives and 2 ambushes on the map. Those are represented by these orange counters with the question marks. I determined before placing them that 2 of them were ambushes and 2 were real, but then I randomized them, and there is a very handy and quite simple random objective location table. You roll 2 die, and based on your numbers, you place those markers. The mission card tells us that our mission is to recover at least 1 real objective and to have 4 or more KIAs by the end before we run out of operations. We are given at the beginning of this mission 7 operations. That's in effect 7 turns. I have chosen, per one of the rules, to save 2 of the resource points I was given, not expend them on my men, and instead give myself an extra operation point to begin with. So you see I have the ops marker on 8, representing the fact that I did that. And moving back here, we see our logistics. We had our 30 recruit points. I will get into how that works in a minute. And we're also told that we are given 1 leader for free, and that our stacking limit for this particular mission is 4. Now, a couple of points here about the rules. I wanted to mention they are relatively clear, I would say, but there are some instances, and this issue of stacking is one of them, where this is a Xerox of the rules I downloaded, as you are allowed to, that there's a little bit of ambiguity, because here in the general rules it says, where I've highlighted, the player may have a maximum of 6 ground units in a space, but indeed, if I'm reading this correctly, each mission card, and there are 4 of them with the game, actually gives you its own stacking, and it's not always 6. In fact, is it ever 6? Well, there it is, 6, 5, and 5. So in fact, only one time is it actually 6. So that's just a minor ambiguity there. There's a couple of other minor ambiguities. For example, I'll just show you one more here. It says under how to set up the game, at the end, the mission is now ready to be played, but it actually doesn't tell you quite clearly where to put your men starting on the board, and I thought I was missing something, but I went online and somebody actually had asked the very same question on BGG, and it was pointed out that here under the definition of the map, bases are the special spaces from which you stage missions, and indeed that is where you put your men. Well, my little stack of men here just got knocked over, but this will give us an opportunity to look here at the map. So the base is represented by this black box here, and you can place your men in those black boxes to start out. Again, not clear whether you are meant to be placing them before or after you already place the randomized objectives, because obviously, I mean, in this case, I can't get quite close enough to them, but had I ended up with an objective here and, I placed most of my men here, obviously that's giving myself a big advantage. So I could be missing it, but there's a little bit of ambiguity there about what to do. In terms of the rest of the map, it's actually quite clear. Your terrain key with indications of what is what. So, for example, the landing box is denoted here by a lighter square, and it's very clear. I'll say now that the reflection on the plexiglass is making it less clear than it actually is. It's quite clear on the map. I don't find, for me, too many or any ambiguities on the map. Town, base, a river crossing, and land and river routes and airfields, all pretty clearly marked. There are some basic tables here. I talked about the recruiting aspect of this game, which for me was one of the reasons I was really interested in it. I like games where I can agonize over who I'm taking, how I'm putting my mission together, and whether I'm going in with, say, fewer men with heavier weapons or whatever. And this is a plus for me for the game. The minus a little bit in the way the counters are made is that, I'm going to just here zoom in on the counter here and we'll talk about this. All right, we'll talk a little bit here about the counters with a bit of a steadier camera. They contain pretty clear and basic information. They have on the left here the firepower number, and on the right their movement value. Some of them have additional information, like here is a leader name, and here this is an engineer, so he's indicated that way. And some of them don't have any other indications. This happens to be the heavy weapons. Now, one thing for me that was missing, and I think unfortunate, was that the recruitment costs are not listed anywhere on the counter. So when you're putting your mission together, you have to sort of remember that, this is your heavy weapons, and then look to that chart and see it costs 3 points, as opposed to, well, the leader comes in for free. Is this going to cost 2 or 3? Is the engineer, I guess this is clear, it's an engineer you see, but to me, it would have been nice to have maybe up here just a small number indicating the recruitment costs. I think there's probably room for it, but they're simple, they're effective, but they don't have that. Some of the other counters in the game, I mentioned earlier, there are the ambush counters and then the real objective counters. This is what they look like. The other side of them has the question mark for placement on the map, so you don't know. And your enemy counters all look like this. They have different numbers for their firepower, which represents how many dice they can throw in combat. And then there are some supporting counters, air power, air supply, and some of the missions require that you construct a base, and this is what the base looks like. So it has no movement, but it does offer you some firepower once it is established. So let me walk you through the combat sequence here. The first thing you do is you roll for initiative, and in this case, I had a leader with me, so that gave my side a +1. I didn't need it because I rolled the higher number anyway. I had already determined that this was the Japanese die, so we initiate combat. And the procedure is pretty simple. You are going to be rolling the number of dice equivalent to your firepower number, and there is a basic battle results table here, which in effect means you need to get a 5 to panic somebody. We're talking about ground units here, and you need a 6 to eliminate 1 unit. So in this particular case, I get to roll 5 dice. This was my roll, and I actually got a 5 and a 6, which means this unit would be eliminated. And then it's their turn. Now they're out, so they go here, and they're only going to get to roll 2 dice. And so you can see the effect of having this unit eliminated. I will say that there's no defensive capability on any of these counters. So, in effect, it doesn't matter that, well, let's put it this way. It isn't more difficult to eliminate this unit with a 6 firepower than this unit with a 2, which is a little strange. Of course, it has a big impact on the opposition because you see now that when they return fire, they can only use 2 dice as opposed to 6, so their chances are greatly decreased. But it's just a fact of the way this combat is set up. It's a simplified game, and that is something that, for me, is something that, as an abstraction, I guess you'd call it, or an omission, that feels a little strange, because it does seem it should be more difficult to eliminate a unit with a 6 firepower than one with 2. In any event, this one was eliminated, and so what will happen is the other side's going to roll 2 dice. They only came up with a 1 and a 3, so the volley comes back to me. You're meant to move down the line and continue back and forth until either one side is totally eliminated or at least panicked. When the opposition is eliminated, they go back into the cup. You don't have that many counters for them, so you need to keep replenishing and redrawing. The other thing that you get to do is very important to keep track of is along this KIA track. And the rules are such that if you achieve a kill, you move up a point or a number on the KIA track. If you yourself have a casualty, you need to move down 2. So you can actually get into negative numbers, and the counter here has a negative side. So this is, I think, a very clever mechanism to account for a lot more casualties on either side than you have, say, counters or space on the map. Very nicely done here as a way of containing in a small footprint a lot of information. Similarly, on the ops chart here, when you're pulling cards, you will often have an effect here. We'll go down to this card here as an example of what happens when you're pulling a card. Often there will be information that is telling you how many opposition units you are to place in the space before you commence combat. And then there is an indication of what happens if you win or lose. So you're gaining or losing 1 operations point. These become quite precious in the game because that is, in effect, how much time you have to achieve your missions. And so this is the way the game continues. You move, you draw a card, and you basically do what is on the card. There are some effects that are on the card. Some cards allow you to retain them for later use. These are hold cards that you can use at a later point to, say, for example, reveal an objective in a way that shortcuts the usual method for doing so. Just a quick look here at examples of the cards. I'm not going to show too many of them, but just want to give you an example of the variety a little bit. So, for example, this card is just good luck for you. You either gain 1 operation or you get to recruit somebody at no cost. And that's just good luck that happens in the field. This is an example of one of those cards I was mentioning where you get to keep it and play it whenever you decide. You can play it immediately or hang on to it to either reveal a couple of objective markers. And the reason you would do that is to sort of know where you need to go on the map and what might be an ambush and what is a real objective, or to take an additional operation, or to make some air or water move, because there is air support that you can bring in. And of course, here you go with the bad luck. This is you're fighting in the jungle to start with, and here you come upon something that's impenetrable, so you're going to lose an operations turn. If you happen to have a sapper with you, or you happen to be using air or water moves, then you can ignore it. So, random luck, good, bad, and choice. So that kind of sums up what the cards are. And I'll come back now with some thoughts on this game overall. Mini games, micro games as I think of them, from all the micro metagaming games I played from the 80s, they're tough because you need to abstract and gloss over so much to get the footprint of the game correct that sometimes you can run the risk of just generalizing too much. And if you don't do that, on the other hand, a lot of the games I used to play back in the day, you had only 8 pages of rules, but they were so dense, and they tried to jam basically a monster game worth of stats and information into a short 8-page rule book that it was just unplayable. And so it's hard to design these. It's hard to find the right balance. I think here, for the most part, that balance is achieved. This is a fast play. It's easy to set up and mostly easy to understand once you get through, some ambiguities in the rules. Nothing that makes it unplayable for sure, and just a function of the fact that you're dealing with a one master rule set, the Commandos rules, with some specifics for each of these specific games and the scenarios in here. Again, as I mentioned, the quality of the components here is quite high, and for the price, really less than the price of a movie, I think you're getting certainly a movie's worth time of entertainment and probably more. So I would definitely put this into my rotation for when I'm looking for a lighter game. On the downside of things, I guess I lost a little bit of the theme of the game, of the historical aspect of it. The cover of the game proclaims that it's historically accurate, but I wouldn't know one way or the other. But to me, this felt a teeny bit generic on that side. I didn't get a feel for the particular missions, the particular terrain, fighting in the jungle. The cards indicate that, but I didn't really get that flavor from the game. And just finally here to finish up, I want to take a look back at the outside of the bag and go through with you again some of the detail here. Obviously, it's a solo game. Company battalion is the level. Our scale, 17 miles to the inch. Playing time, 1 to 2 hours. Well, that's a little generous. I mean, I can't see it taking that long. I guess the full campaign with 4 missions, possibly. I don't even know if it could take 2 hours. To me, it's a much shorter playing time than is indicated here. Complexity, yes, I would say the complexity is low, and obviously solitaire high. Again, Merrill's Marauders, part of the minigame series from Decision Games, part of the Commandos series, I should say, from Decision Games. Minutes to learn, check. Quick to play, check. Historically accurate, I can't say. Again, as I said, not enough information in the game for me to make that determination. I guess I wonder why there wasn't at least even a couple of paragraphs of historical information about this particular situation in World War II. I did look it up because I was not educated at all about it, and I was curious, but I am also curious as to why there wasn't some information in the game bag itself. But overall, so the overall verdict on this game, if you are looking for a relatively simple game, a quick game to learn, certainly a portable game with high quality components at an affordable price point, I would definitely recommend this for you for solo play. This is definitely a solitaire play design, and unlike some solitaire games, which perhaps are more complicated, I don't really think this one is suited toward any type of cooperative play. It's just too easy, unless perhaps you're trying to teach somebody totally new to wargaming. Then, of course, this would be useful. It does offer you a certain amount of decision making when putting together your team. There are different people that you have to choose from that each have different and relevant effects that they can do, like engineers and leaders, etc. So, the type and scope of decisions that you have are limited, as you would expect in a short mini game, but they make sense, and they're very clearly integrated into the game. The experience of playing it, I think, is, as I mentioned, not particularly historically bound for me. I didn't get a deep historical feel for it, and I think had the same game been set in something completely different, totally different time frame, be it Vietnam or the Civil War, I think the game might have felt somewhat similar. For me, that's not too much of a drawback. I enjoyed the gameplay. It will be something I take out from time to time when I'm looking for a filler or something to take with me. It's very portable. For people who are bound by or interested in a historical immersion, I would say that you probably would be disappointed in this game. It does not offer that, or at least it did not offer that to me. So those are my thoughts on it. Overall, good quality components, integrated simple gameplay that makes sense, not so much historical immersion. Merrill's Marauders from Decision Games.